Hey everybody, it's Tim from Tadabase here, and this is Build It with Tim. On today's episode, we are going to start from scratch and we're going to build an entire application using the power of AI tools. If you've been paying attention to recent developments with ChatGPT and OpenAI, OpenAI has released the ability to make your own GPTs, meaning you have the ability to now create your own AI helpers or your own AI chatbots in order to have conversations and answer questions based on the knowledge that you provide it. So we're going to be using this to actually help us design the structure for both the data builder and the page builder inside of your Tadabase application so that we can build an app from scratch with our own personal AI assistant. Now, I've already gone in and I've created my GPT here inside of ChatGPT, and it's called Tadabase Helper, and it's simply a chatbot that answers questions based on the Tadabase Knowledge Center. So I've given it a URL for reference, and now it can answer questions based on that information. So what we're going to do here is just paste in a simple prompt describing the application that we want to build. We want to build an app for my lawn care business, and we'd like a breakdown of the tables and the fields that I should create in order to have the best connection structure for use with Tadabase. And then I've described what I need to manage, including my clients, employees, client properties, jobs, and services. After reviewing the answer that I get from my custom AI helper here, I can see that there's some things that I'd like to change. Specifically, there's always a question of how we want to design the actual tables that contain people. So inside of Tadabase, we have our users table, and this can very well contain every single type of person that our application is going to track, whether it's an employee, a client. We can store them here in the users table if we intend for them to log in to the application. The alternative, which you can see here that our AI helper has suggested, is to split the actual people into two different tables. You have a clients table and you have an employees table. Now, this is totally fine if we want to go that way, but just know that if we want these people to log in, we will have to create a user record for them and connect them to a client or to an employee. So I think for now, I'll probably build it in the same way that I am seeing it here with the two split tables, the clients and the employees table. And everything else here looks pretty good as well. There's going to be a couple changes that we'll make along the way, but overall, this is a really good start for what we need to build. So I'm going to be using this as reference as we go to the builder, and let's head over there now. We'll just start to build out our clients table and our employee table. Now, I've copied some of that information off screen here so that I can continue to reference it. But we'll simply just start adding our tables. So we can start with clients. And since we're doing two tables at once, we'll just kind of work on both here. So we have clients and we have employees, and now we will start to add the fields that were suggested to us. So anywhere inside of our AI answer here, where we see things like client ID, employee ID, property ID, a lot of this is a nice thing to have. It's worth noting that IDs, and as far as unique identifiers go, are automatically generated by Tadabase and are stored behind the scenes. So Tadabase as a system itself uses unique identifiers to handle records and data tables and things like that. But we can always place our own unique identifiers in here in the form of an auto increment field in order to kind of help us with some further identification or more user-friendly or readable identification. As far as database structure goes in building out database connections, we don't really need to reference those IDs. That's all handled by Tadabase behind the scenes. So just a note on that. So for those types of fields, we'll just do auto increments. So client name we can leave and we will add an auto increment, and we'll use this for client ID. We have our client name. I'll just reorder those a little bit here. And then we have the contact information. So we'll do like email address and phone number, an address field, and then a rich text field for any notes or comments that we want to leave for this particular client. So we'll say notes and comments for the rich text field name. Okay, so that's it for this table. If we go back and we were to reference our chat GPT or our Tadabase GPT answer here, this is our clients table completely finished. For the employees table, it's going to be really similar. There's a lot of kind of overlap here, which is a larger part of the conversation if we want to split these into two tables or if we want to merge them into a single users table. And it's possible that I might do that down the road. But for now, we're just going to keep them separate. So again, we'll do contact information like email, phone, address, and specific to the employees table here, we're just going to do a select field for the employee's position. So whether they are like a gardener or a lawnmower or I don't know, whatever driver, whatever the positions may be, we'll just put them in there. Okay, so we can save that and now we have our employees table is complete. Let's jump back into these other tables because now things are going to start to get a little bit more complex because we're adding connections here. But we'll take just a moment to just kind of describe what's going on here. So we have a client properties table, and this is good because a client might have multiple properties. So if you are managing a lawn care service, let's say you pick up a commercial client that has multiple business properties, then we're going to have that client stored in the clients table. And then we're going to have multiple properties for that client listed in the client properties table. We'll be able to link those properties to a client with ease by using a connection field. So we can say this property belongs to this client and repeat that throughout each record that we add to the table. Furthermore, in the jobs table, we're adding more connections to identify um, different relationships and make it even more unique, where we have a job that relates to a property and a client and a service, which we'll get to, which is down here, table number 5. Now, I have a very good video about this type of structure where it's kind of like the connections are cascading, and go figure, that video is called Cascading Connections. And it's a really good kind of overview into how this kind of structure works when we are building out additional tables that store multiple connections to multiple different parents. Okay, so we'll go with the client properties table here. We have, again, I'm just going to copy this so I can reference it off screen and hop back into the builder so we can start working on this and building out our connections. Client properties. Okay, now, first and foremost, again, we'll just to be consistent, we will add that auto increment for property ID. Again, these are going to be unique identifiers just for this record. And this is going to be an auto populating kind of thing. And it's different than the behind the scenes database record ID, but it's a nice way to kind of identify things using just very readable numbers as opposed to a mismatched string of characters. Now, we probably don't need a name for the property unless we wanted to specify it in some way, but I think there's going to be enough information here that we can uniquely identify a property that we won't need it. So the first thing that we're going to need when we actually create a client property record is which client does it belong to. So we're going to add a connection field and we're going to choose the client's data table that it as the table that this record actually connects to. And we'll choose the one-to-one connection, saying one property relates to one client. We can then choose our display field, and this is how do we want to display the client information of the connection field. So we'll choose the client name, which is probably fine, and then we can just simply name as the header of this particular field. Next, we'll need a property address. We're seeing a field called property size, which sure, maybe it's not something that I normally would have thought of, but it was suggested to me, and I can see how it might have some advantages. So we'll say, I don't know what this would look like as far as actually running or owning a lawn care service, but we'll just say small, medium, or large property size. You could, of course, get far more specific with an actual, number of acres or something like that. But for now, we'll just do small, medium, and large. We're going to add a rich text field here to store notes. And the suggestion here made by our AI helper is to maybe use this field to store gate codes or other special instructions. And I think that's a fantastic idea. So we will put that in and save that field. The next table that we're going to be building out is the jobs. And like I said, it has multiple connections to multiple different parents. Each job is going to be specific to a client. It's going to be specific to a property. And in reality, a property that is connected to the job's client. It's also going to have some sort of assigned employees. Now, I think we could probably keep that field. We can do something with that. We have a date time field. We have a job status field, which is going to be like an option field or something, and then a service type field. And again, notes and comments. But I'm seeing that before I can actually create this table, I'm going to need to add the services table so that I can reference it here in the jobs table above. So let's skip ahead to this one. We'll do the services table next. And this one's pretty straightforward. We just have, again, an auto increment, service name, description, and price. So let's go ahead and do our services. We'll add our auto increment, service ID. We'll do a long text for the description. And then we can do a currency for price. So we'll make this, we'll do decimal places, 2 and thousands, comma. Okay, good. And there's our services table. All right, now back to our jobs table, we can now reference and build a connection to this table because it now exists. Right off the bat here, we can do our job ID as our auto increment. And again, we probably don't need that job name. Let me just see. There is no, yes, it's not suggesting that we do any sort of job name. So we can delete that field and go on to the others. So we'll do our connection to client, connection to property, date, time, job status, service. And I'm going to come back to this one. We'll talk about this one a little bit more in depth in a moment. Okay, so to start building out all these various connections, we'll do this in the same way that we did before. We're just adding a connection field and we are referencing the client field that we want to display. So we'll do the client name, name the actual field itself, and now we have our client name connection. We also want properties. So we'll do property, we could do property address as the actual display field, and we can leave the name as client property. That's fine. We'll do a date and time for the scheduled date and time. We'll add in a select field here for the actual job status. And we can do scheduled, completed, and canceled. And let's give them some color just to make that more clear. Now, for every job, we're going to list or connect to a service that's available through our business, right? So whether that's, grass cutting or weed eating or gardening or mulch, whatever it is, we're going to have a connection to our services table so that for each job, we can also connect to a service. And then lastly, we will do our notes and comments here again as a field just in case we need it. Right. So the field that I have left out here is the assigned employees. So there is absolutely a way that we can do this here, and that's simply through adding a connection to our employees table and making it a one-to-many connection. Okay, so when we have a job record that's created, we can now connect to multiple employees within this single connection field. That is option one, and it is a totally viable way of doing this. The other way that you could do this is to create another data table and call this like schedule or something like that, or job assignments. After creating this table, we would then connect from the job assignments to the jobs table and do our one-to-one scheduling here through a connection to the job and a connection to the employee. So for each job, we could have 4 or 5 records that contain all of the employees that are scheduled for that job. Okay, that is also a totally viable way of doing this. Now, for simplicity's sake, we're going to keep it the way that it was suggested to us by our AI helper, and we're simply going to use the one-to-many connection field. So inside of our jobs table, we'll go back to our fields and add a connection, choose employees, and do one-to-many this time to say that we can now, let's say, call this assigned employees. And now this gives us the ability to add multiple employees inside this connection field from our employees table. So at this point, our actual data tables are built. So we followed along pretty much exactly how this was suggested to us in order to build out this data structure. And if we review this, we can kind of get a sense of how things will work. So the employees table is very much a standalone table. There are no connections or outgoing connections from this table to any other data tables. We can add in all of our employees that work for our organization, and everything is stored there in a pretty much static way. Our clients are the same way. We add our clients in, so through whatever client intake that we're going to build, we can now store all of our clients in this static kind of data table. Same thing as the employees table. Now, as things get more interesting, now we can start to work through the properties that belong to the clients. So if you envision what this would look like through the application side of things, which we will get to in another video, we can now add properties that connect to a client and manage those properties as they relate to any specific client, as well as the jobs where we can add in jobs for a client, for a property, and for a service, and then begin to assign different employees. And we have job statuses. So there's a lot of kind of moving parts within the jobs table specifically that allow us to use some really cool Tadabase features like sending notifications, using maybe the calendar component. There's a lot of cool stuff that we can do within the jobs table to kind of make this a more user friendly and better experience when using the application itself. And then the services, again, is kind of a standalone static table where we are simply just storing our services with their name, description, and price. The last thing I want to show you here inside the actual builder is if we go to our app settings and then we go to support and table connection graph, we can start to see the actual structure and how each table relates to others. Reviewing this particular graph helps us make sense of everything that we've just done inside the data builder and allows us to kind of move gracefully into the next step of building out the page builder. Okay, speaking of which, if we go back to our Tadabase helper AI GPT, we can now start to use this again to help us with the page structure. For next week's video, what we're going to do is we're going to use the same process to help us design and build our pages inside of Tadabase as well. So you can see here, if I ask, can you help me build the page structure, what the layouts, pages, and components per page will look like, you can see once we have our answer here, we actually received some pretty good suggestions on how to build the actual front end live application, the different pages that we're going to need, and the different components that might be useful for those specific pages. So we're going to come back to this next week and build it with Tim and continue on with this application that's basically suggested 100% by a custom Tadabase AI helper in ChatGPT. All right, so that's it for this week's episode of Build It with Tim. Make sure to tune in next week so that we can continue on with this build. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time. Take care.